Hey, welcome to Crossroads. In today's episode, we'll be talking about Biden backing the narrative to remove Donald Trump from the 2024 ballot. I'll be giving some updates on where things are at with it. We'll also be talking about some of history because guess what? This has actually happened before to guess who? Well, President Abraham Lincoln, notably right before the Civil War. I'll tell you that history. Also, Republicans are rallying behind Donald Trump over the Colorado case, actually including a lot of the other candidates. Some big stuff. Let's talk about it. Now, President Joe Biden was questioned about the campaign to remove President Donald Trump from the 2024 ballot. Remember, it's happening in Colorado right now. And while Biden did not directly comment on the Colorado case, he declined to do it, he backed the narrative for it, claiming that Trump engaged in insurrection and so should be denied any future run for president. Let me show you this first. Here's a video. It's Biden responding to reporters outside of Air Force One. Watch.
Your reaction to the Colorado ruling on Trump at the ballot?
I'm not going to comment on a court case. That's up to the court. That's all I have to say.
Is he an insurrectionist?
What you say?
Is Trump an insurrectionist, sir?
Well, I think it's certainly self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. No question about it. None. Zero. And he seems to be doubling down on about everything. Anyway, I've got to go do this.
All right. Now, just briefly, for anyone coming into the story late, the Democrat Supreme Court in Colorado just recently ruled to remove Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential ballot. This is going to make it so that Trump is not included on the ballot, and even if you write in his name to vote for Donald Trump, your vote will not be accepted in the state of Colorado. California is trying to do this right now as well. They're actually saying they're going to try to find every avenue to do the exact same thing. And there's a push in the United States right now by Democrats to try to do this across the entire country. Now, in Colorado, they're pushing this to the Supreme Court. They're not doing it directly just yet. They're giving the Supreme Court until January 4th to decide whether it's going to take up the case. If the Supreme Court takes it up, it's going to put the whole thing on pause, and we're not going to see, Trump removed just yet. But if the Supreme Court decides to not take the case, then Colorado is going to move forward, and very likely you're going to see other states as well move forward with this. And Donald Trump is going to be pushed off the ballot. You will not be able to vote for him, depending on the state you're in. Now, the argument they're using was that Trump should be disqualified from ever holding office again, ever, due to his alleged role in an insurrection on January 6th. The argument is that, if Trump gave material support or comfort or whatever to individuals who engage in insurrection, which they claim January 6th was, then he violated, they claim, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether that amendment applies to presidents, which many courts have already said it does not. And so there's a lot of complicated things here. Again, it's resting on the idea of, well, was J6 an insurrection? There aren't really charges on it. Was Trump guilty in that? Trump has not been charged on that. And also, does that apply to presidents? Which, again, many courts have already said it does not apply to presidents. But regardless, the Democrats are pushing this very hard right now. And in, again, Colorado, they have done it. Now, that said, while Biden appears to be indirectly supporting the move, he seems to support this against Trump, the White House itself looks like it's trying to avoid the issue. Here's a transcript from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre's comments. This is from a press gaggle aboard Air Force One yesterday. Let me read it to you. This is the White House. It says this. Question: do you have any reaction to the Colorado Supreme Court? Ms. Jean-Pierre: so, look, we follow the law here. I cannot comment on anything that is related to an upcoming election like 2024, and this is a legal process, so I'm just not going to comment. Question: does the president believe that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist? Ms. Jean-Pierre: I'm just not going to get into I'm not going to get into a legal process here. Obviously, there is one. I'm not going to get ahead, and I'm not going to speak to the decision that Colorado has made. I'm just not going to comment on it. Question: can you say if the White House would like the Supreme Court to quickly pick up the case to get it settled? Ms. Jean-Pierre, look, what I can say is the president is not involved. We're not involved in this. This is a legal process. I'm just not going to comment. And they keep pushing. They say, question again. Does the White House believe that the major party political candidates, that courts should decide which major party political candidates should be on the ballot? Ms. Jean-Pierre, just not going to get involved in any court decision that's made. The Supreme Court, any court decision, it's a legal process. Going to leave it alone, not comment. 2024, I'm not going to comment. Hatch Act. We tried to do our best to follow the law and just not going to comment on this. Of course, Biden commented on it. So, it's an interesting situation they have with Joe Biden, where they don't want to violate the Hatch Act when it comes to, of course, the White House press secretary, but Joe Biden does comment on it. Now, I said yesterday that I think this is one of the worst things that's ever happened to the country. I think that if Donald J. Trump is removed from the ballot for 2024, this represents an undermining of the basic constitutional right that forms the system of government we have. The ability for people to elect the people who lead them, the President of the United States in this case. And I said that, really, I think if this goes through, this is going to represent one of the biggest attacks on the Constitution and on our democratic process, which, again, a republic is a representative democracy. The greatest attack on our system of government, I think, in history. But I should note, this actually has happened before. So it's not technically something we've never seen before. The big question is, well, are they going to do it across the entire country? Is the Supreme Court, if they rule on it, is this going to be the whole United States? Well, we'll have to see on that. But on individual states and on a smaller level, we've actually seen this happen before in history. Now, I've been looking more into cases like this, and it should be noted that Democrats removed Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, from the ballots in the election of 1860. And this notably took place just before the Civil War. Brief history: Abraham Lincoln, of course, freed the slaves in America. He was a Republican. In fact, he was, when the Republican Party was very, very new, the policy of the Republican Party was mainly to end slavery in the United States. The Democratic Party was the pro-slavery party, and they were trying to defend the right of the southern states, in this case, to own slaves. Because that was the big argument they had, Abraham Lincoln being a very new candidate with a very new Republican Party, and the Democrats being an established party, representing slavery. The Democrat states actually removed Abraham Lincoln from the ballots in a few states. And again, it should be noted, the context of this is this was, of course, the American Civil War, and this happened right before it. Let me show you the website of the Lincoln Memorial Shrine, and it says this: the election of 1860 might have been the most pivotal in American history. Abraham Lincoln, the candidate of the 6-year-old Republican Party, ran on a platform of keeping slavery completely out of the new territories that had been annexed from Mexico 11 years earlier. The dominant Democratic Party split into two factions over the slavery issue. Northern Democrats, who felt the residents of the territories themselves should decide, nominated Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's longtime rival, as their standard bearer. Southern Democrats, who wanted slavery extended regardless of the residents' desires, nominated Vice President John Breckinridge of Kentucky. A fourth candidate, John Bell, ran as a compromise candidate under the, quote, "keep the Union together at all costs" banner of the Constitutional Union Party. Remember, that was the big argument they had at the time. There was an argument to split the Union, to create a confederacy of the southern states. Now, it notes the campaign was heated. Lincoln and the Republicans were not even on the ballot in the states of the Deep South. In the southern states, they removed Abraham Lincoln from the ballot like they're doing to Trump right now. It notes that although Lincoln only won 40% of the popular vote, the split in the Democrat Party enabled him to secure a comfortable majority in the Electoral College and therefore became President of the United States, despite the fact that Democrats had removed, in all the southern states, Abraham Lincoln from the ballot. So we've seen it before, and we saw a Republican still win despite the efforts of the Democrats, and notably when Democrats were defending slavery. And as we're seeing right now, something else is happening, which is Republicans are deeply coming to the defense of Donald Trump. Now, remember, before the legal attacks on Trump, before the charges, before the raid on Mar-a-Lago, before all of this, it looked like the Republican Party was trying to distance itself from Donald Trump. As soon as these actions happened, though, ironically, a lot of the Republican Party had to get behind Trump. And of course, now where they're accusing Trump of one of the worst crimes you can commit, insurrection, to the extent that they want to remove him from the ballot for 2024, this is about as bad as you can get. Republicans are coming to Donald Trump's defense. This is the House Speaker Mike Johnson on X, and he said this. He said, today's ruling attempting to disqualify President Trump from the Colorado ballot is nothing but a thinly veiled partisan attack. He said, regardless of political affiliation, every citizen registered to vote should not be denied the right to support our former president and the individual who is the leader in every poll of the Republican primary. We trust the U.S. Supreme Court will set aside this reckless decision and let the American people decide the next president of the United States. Senator Marco Rubio also came forward. Remember, he was running against Trump back in the 2016 elections. Marco Rubio said this. He said the U.S. has put sanctions on other countries for doing exactly what the Colorado Supreme Court has done today. Vivek Ramaswamy, one of Trump's political, someone he's running against right now, Vivek Ramaswamy, is also a presidential candidate. And I should note, it's not just Vivek, but actually all the other candidates are coming out as well in support of, at least in defense of Trump, maybe not in support of Trump. But Vivek is saying this. I won't read the whole thing because he wrote a very long post, but I'll give you the main parts. He said, this is what an actual attack on democracy looks like. In an un-American, unconstitutional, and unprecedented decision, a cabal of Democrat judges are barring Trump from the ballot in Colorado. Having tried every trick in the book to eliminate President Trump from running in this election, the bipartisan establishment is now deploying a new tactic to bar him from ever holding office again, the 14th Amendment. Vivek says, I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary unless Trump is also allowed to be on the state's ballot. And I demand that Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley to do the same immediately, or else they are tacitly endorsing this illegal maneuver, which will have disastrous consequences for our country. Now, Vivek goes on to list his interpretation of some of the legal issues with this. Again, it's very long, so I won't go over the whole thing, but he continues stating this. He says, and there's another legal problem. Trump is not a former officer of the United States. And I should note, if you actually read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it says officer of the United States. Trump being the former president, Vivek is saying would not fall under that. And Vivek says, as that term is used in the Constitution, meaning Section 3 does not apply. As the Supreme Court explained in Free Enterprise Fund v. Public Company Accounting Oversight Board in 2010, an officer of the United States, as again Section 3 of the 14th Amendment says, is, quote, someone appointed by the president to aid him in his duties under Article 2, Section 2. The term does not apply to elected officials and certainly not to the president himself. And I should note, actually, lower courts have ruled the same. The Colorado Supreme Court is really going out on a limb on this. And even though it's, Democrats, it was a 4-3 decision, it barely passed. The interpretation already, because the Democrats have been trying this across the whole country, the interpretation already has been in line with what Vivek just said, that again, this does not apply to the president. It applies specifically to officers of the United States who are appointed by the president and not to the president himself. Now, that said, the Colorado Republican Party, again, where all this is taking place, the Republicans in Colorado, they are vowing to withdraw from the primary election and to, quote, convert to a pure caucus system if the Colorado Supreme Court moves forward to block people from voting for Trump. Meaning, they're not going to let the Colorado Supreme Court interfere with the process of choosing who is the leading candidate for the Republican Party. They're not going to recognize it, and Donald Trump is going to become the de facto choice if the Supreme Court chooses to stay with this, again in Colorado. On this as well, you're also seeing voices from the other side. You have a lot of Democrats coming forward. Many of them, I'll just show you one, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he made some pretty serious statements about this. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that every American, remember, he's running as a Democrat right now. A lot of his policies are very much not in line with Trump's. He doesn't want to run with Trump. Some people suggested he should. But he's coming to Trump's defense, and he said that every American should be troubled by the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to remove President Trump from the ballot. He said the court has deprived him of a consequential right without having been convicted of a crime. This is done without any evidentiary hearing in which he is given the basic right of confronting his accusers. And you can argue with this as well. The entire basis of this, aside from the legal loopholes, aside from whether this even applies to a former president or a current president, aside from the entire, constitutional interpretation, if we just ignore that entire debate, there's another major hole with this entire case, which is Donald Trump has never been found guilty of insurrection. Donald Trump has never been found guilty of aiding or abetting or giving material comfort to people who engaged in insurrection. There's no legal basis on which they're drawing this conclusion, in other words. It's merely a media narrative being pushed and a political narrative being pushed, which has no basis in law. And that's the issue that RFK Jr. is raising. Again, he's saying this was done without an evidentiary hearing in which Trump, he, is given the basic right of confronting his accusers. He notes that when any candidate is deprived of his right to run, the American people are deprived of their right to choose. And if the Democrats want to argue about threats to democracy and we must defend our democracy, the most basic part of a democracy is the ability of people to choose who leads them. And if the Democrats in this case want to deprive the American people of voting for the candidate they want to lead this country, they themselves are engaging in the most undemocratic policy I think this country has ever witnessed, maybe again since Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, when the Democrats did that again, by the way. RFK Jr. continues stating, I hope the Colorado Supreme Court swiftly reverses this decision. At the very least, it contributes to the perception that the elites are picking the president by manipulating the legal system and through other interventions. He says that if Trump is kept out of office through judicial fiat rather than being defeated in a fair election, his supporters will never accept the results. This country will become ungovernable. And I think he's raising some real serious issues here. Again, what RFK Jr. is suggesting, that if this goes through, if the Democrats successfully remove Donald J. Trump from the ballot for 2024, this is going to destroy faith in our system of government. It's going to make it at the very least so that people who want to vote for Trump, maybe even people who don't want to vote for Trump, again, you have RFK Jr. here, maybe even some Democrats who, don't want to be involved in this, they want to maybe have Biden or, whoever else. It's going to create the perception that whoever wins did not win fairly, that the person who wins only won because there was a manipulation of the election process through the use of the legal system. And again, as RFK Jr. notes, through other interventions. And he says that if Trump is defeated, not through the votes, not through the elections, then the people who support him, which is a lot of people, that's close to half the country in terms of voters, his supporters will never accept the results. He says this country will become ungovernable. Because if anybody is elected in a presidential election that has had this kind of a manipulation take place, whoever is elected will not be seen as legitimate. Whoever is elected will not be seen as someone who is legitimately elected by the American people, because the American people were denied the right to cast their votes for the person they wanted. And as he says, the country very likely will become ungovernable if the Democrats and the establishment in general move forward with this. There are some Republicans doing it too. It's not just technically Democrats, although it's mainly them. Now, that said, Donald Trump and his campaign have responded directly as well. Let me show you what they're saying. This is the statement from Trump's campaign spokesperson on X. It says this. They say, quote, "Unsurprisingly, the all-Democrat appointed Colorado Supreme Court has ruled against President Trump supporting a Soros-funded, George Soros, left-wing group scheme to interfere in an election on behalf of crooked Joe Biden by removing President Trump's name from the ballot and eliminating the rights of Colorado voters to vote for the candidate of their choice." It should be noted here that what the Trump campaign is saying is that the group that started this movement, the group that's trying to remove Donald J. Trump from the ballots for 2024 using this loophole of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that group is one funded by George Soros. And that this Soros-backed group that is undermining the entire basic system of government we have, that is undermining the election process, that is pushing something that has no legal basis because Trump has not been found guilty of the thing they're using to try to make this happen, again, insurrection, using this argument through a warped interpretation of the Constitution that does not go by the language of the Constitution, and also that has already been thrown out in many cases because of that loophole. It does not apply to presidents. That George Soros funding these groups is doing this to America. And Trump's campaign continues by stating the Democrat Party leaders are in a state of paranoia over the growing dominant lead President Trump has amassed in the polls. They have lost faith in the failed Biden presidency and are now doing everything they can to stop the American voters from throwing them out of office next November. The Colorado Supreme Court issued a completely flawed decision tonight, and we will swiftly file an appeal to the United States Supreme Court and a concurrent request for a stay of this deeply undemocratic decision. We have full confidence that the U.S. Supreme Court will quickly rule in our favor and finally put an end to these un-American lawsuits. Now, if that happens, right, if the Supreme Court does rule on this, and again, I think without a doubt they're going to have to. The Supreme Court, the hand of the Supreme Court is being forced right now. They're going to have to hear a couple different things, not only the argument of the 14th Amendment, but also on executive privilege, whether Trump had executive protection when he was accused of the many other alleged crimes that he's being charged with across the country. Again, remember, Special Counsel Jack Smith is trying to fast-track that process in time for the elections. Special Counsel Jack Smith, working with the Biden administration, right, the one investigating Donald Trump, he's the one bringing the charges against Trump in all these different states, notably doing it in Washington, D.C., right? They're holding their grand juries in Washington, D.C., keeping that same grand jury for multiple charges, and then bringing the charges in other states, which in itself is questionably legal. That Jack Smith? While Donald Trump is arguing that in the many cases he's facing, that he was president of the United States, he had executive privilege. And because of that, a certain degree of legal protection, therefore, the many charges brought against him are illegal. They're not legal charges. They shouldn't have happened in the first place. Because of that, a lot of the cases against Trump are on hold right now. And of course, that's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. Normally, you'd have an appeals process. It has to go through the entire legal system until it is appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Jack Smith, the special counsel, is trying to bypass that entire process. He wants to fast track it because he wants this done before the elections are over. Because normally that process would push this back, would push the Trump charges until after the 2024 elections. Now, if this is not meant to interfere with our elections, why is Jack Smith trying to make sure, even to the point where he would bypass the appeals process, trying to make sure that this happens before the elections so that it is able to interfere with the elections. Why are they doing that? And now the Colorado Supreme Court is forcing the hand of the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, using this other method. If you read the language of the charge they're making, again, the determination they have that Trump violated the 14th Amendment, right? What they're doing with this is in their actual document, they are saying that they're sending this to the U.S. Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court does not hear it by January 4th, they're going to move forward with it. Whether it's Jack Smith or the Colorado Supreme Court, they're working in tandem toward that same goal of forcing the hand of the U.S. Supreme Court to make this determination on Donald J. Trump while it can still affect the elections. And I would again question, if this was not about rigging the elections, if this was not about affecting it, then why are they doing that? Now that said, as this happens, I think Donald Trump and his campaign are right about something, whether you agree with everything else or not. The Democrats, and especially the establishment, they no longer believe that Joe Biden can win. And as this takes place, the Democrat leadership, they're desperately trying to help Biden in his campaign. Now, I reported before, Hillary Clinton recently did a fundraiser for Joe Biden. There's now talk that Hillary Clinton might even run with him, possibly. We'll have to see. And now guess who's coming out? Not out, but coming out to help Biden at least. Barack Obama. And he's campaigning for Biden as well. And interestingly, they did a video together. It's going viral on Twitter right now. Not because people like it, but because they're making fun of it. Let me show you what it says. Let me play it.
Hey, President Biden, is Obamacare still a thing? Is it still a thing?
Yes. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, Biden Care, whatever you call it, yes, it is still a thing. The other side's been trying to repeal it every year since it's existed, but will keep fighting to protect it.
Not just protect it, but expand it, saving millions of dollars for working families. We're covering more people than ever.
Just go to healthcare.gov to learn more.
Yeah, it's still a BFD.
Now, did you get that? Obama calls it Obamacare, and then he switches the language and calls it Biden Care. And look, of course, Joe Biden was vice president under Barack Obama when Obamacare was passed. But look, Obamacare is not doing so hot with many voters, especially since it caused people's, health insurance costs to skyrocket. I remember back in the day before Obamacare, my dad and so on, we were able to get health insurance for four of us, maybe $140 a month. It wasn't much. Now, a lot of Americans, they cannot afford health care. And of course, people are saying, well, you can't afford it because the costs have been deferred to other people, like those people who just plain old don't feel like working, or the illegal aliens flooding into our country by the millions. And people who can no longer afford health care are having to watch as illegal aliens violating our laws are getting health care that they cannot afford for free. The health care that many American citizens cannot afford is being given to non-citizens whose very presence in this country is a violation of our laws. And of course, Biden and Obama now are coming out trying to bring that back and make it sound like a victory. Remember, that's one of the big pressure points right now coming from the left and coming from the Biden administration and coming from the Democrats, all the advisors. They're telling Biden, stop talking about Donald Trump because, you can't campaign on just not liking somebody, which is what he's been going on. The MAGA extremists are a threat to the basic soul of our democracy. That's the narrative he's pushing. They're saying, Joe, stop talking about Trump. Focus on your victories. Focus on the things you've done. Focus on the economy. And here you have, of course, Obama coming out directly and helping Joe Biden do that. Joe, let's talk about our victories. Let's talk about Obamacare. Let's call it Biden Care. And that's how they're doing it right now. That being said, you might be wondering, well, if they can't get rid of Donald Trump, if nothing else is working, well, what else can they possibly do? Well, one of the things the Democrats are pushing right now in other areas is trying to give non-citizens, as we're being flooded with literally millions of illegal aliens and migrants, to give them the right to vote. Because, maybe if people are getting some free handouts, they're more likely to vote for the party giving them those free handouts. And let me show you this, right? It's happening at least in one local election right now. This is in Boston where they're pushing this, but they're doing it in several U.S. states. California, Washington, D.C., a lot of places are pushing for this right now. And it's being pushed, really across the country on a smaller degree. They want to do it on local elections first. But of course, the way that policies usually move forward is they expand it over time. Fox News says this: the self-proclaimed sanctuary city of Boston is considering a resolution that would allow immigrants with legal status to vote in local elections. Now, what defines legal status? Normally, we think green card holders or people with permanent residence. You could argue that, while we talk about the people illegally crossing our border by the millions right now, we say usually illegal aliens or illegal immigrants. A lot of them are kind of here on pseudo-legal grounds because they're gaming the amnesty system. It's not quite clear whether the legal status would apply to people in the process of applying for amnesty, because you have these United Nations groups like IOM and others coaching, and different NGOs financed through the IOM, International Organization for Migration, and by the State Department by extension, giving a lot of the money to it. These individuals are being coached, they're being trained, they're being taught, they're being given documents and other things, teaching them how to lie in order to claim that they're applying, they're in need of amnesty, which they're not. Normally, if you're applying for amnesty, you have to apply for it in the first secure country you arrive in. And Mexico, by the way, would fall under that, meaning that if they move from, let's say, Panama and the Darien Gap up through Latin America and reach Mexico, legally, under the normal process of amnesty, they would have to apply for amnesty in Mexico, not in the United States. They're gaming the system. But that concept of legal status could be interpreted to include people part of that, part of the amnesty system, although it's not yet being clearly defined. But the point is that in Boston right now, in several U.S. states, they're looking to give voting rights to people who have that legal status. And Fox News says here it's a proposal that reportedly has gained support from the majority of Boston city councilors and was weighed during a council meeting on Tuesday. Councilor Kendra Lara introduced the home rule petition, which was debated during a Tuesday afternoon hearing among fellow councilors, immigration advocates, and city election officials, the Boston Herald reported. And it says this, quote, "We have people who, despite not being given a voice in the local government through the ballot, have worked, sacrificed, and invested in their neighborhoods, and all people should have a say in the decisions that impact their daily lives," Lara reportedly said. Now, I should note, when we talk about illegal aliens, about 50% of them receive welfare, or at least families. And of course, if you're part of a political party promising more free handouts, well, people are going to vote for the free money. If you give a baby the right to vote, it's going to vote for more milk. If you give somebody on welfare the right to vote, they're going to vote for more welfare. You know what I mean? Usually speaking, not everybody, of course. And so if someone's very presence in the United States is hinged upon a certain political party winning because they've been given a legal loophole to illegally enter, stay in the country, work in the country, even get benefits from the country, even benefits that are not allowed for the American citizens, like free housing and free health care and free everything else, what do you think they're going to vote for? It amounts, in my opinion, to like bribery. It's like a mafia. The individuals making these policies are giving free handouts to maintain the support of the people who they believe might vote for them in the future. And by doing this, in my opinion, again, this amounts to bribery. They're giving people free handouts and saying, if you vote for the other guys, you're going to lose all of this, and they're going to kick you out of the country. Now let me register you to vote so you can vote. Who do you think they're going to vote for, and why do you think this game is being played? I think that's where you go right there. And of course, again, they're only doing this for local elections first, but I would say that's how the slow creep of government policy works. You introduce something first with a narrow focus, and then you gradually expand it. You gradually have these immigration groups and these rights groups advocate for more rights and more rights and more rights until they're given essentially the same type of rights that are afforded to the average American citizen. And yes, there is talk of that as well. And just imagine if all the non-citizens they have could go and vote. who would be also given incentives, notably from the big government, including, free houses and so on. And, who do you think they're going to vote for? It raises the big issue as well, right? It raises the big issue as well of what happens if these individuals, millions of them, are allowed to vote like that. Well, the amount of people that the Democrats have brought into the United States illegally would utterly change this country. You would never have another Republican victory. You would never have another victory from, the conservatives. You would only have victories very likely from the people giving the free handouts, because the people getting the free handouts are the ones voting. Now, if that were to happen, it would utterly change our system of government. And yes, the Democrats are actively pushing to have that happen. Now, let me show you briefly, here's where that's at in New York, because in New York right now, what's interesting is that a lot of these really radical policies, they're being pushed by the city councils. They're not being pushed through the governors or the mayors, at least not everywhere. And in fact, in a lot of these states, these sanctuary states, you actually have some kind of clashes taking place between the governors, the mayors, and the city council, because the city councils are pushing really extreme policies, while, at least with immigration on this front, a lot of times the mayors and so on, they're realizing that it's going to collapse the system. They're running out of money. The system is breaking down. Here's Daily Mail. It says that Mayor Eric Adams, has often clashed with the president, Biden, constantly begging Washington for money to solve a disaster that he claimed will destroy my city. Illegal aliens, he's saying, are going to destroy New York City. It says it comes alongside the news that there are now over 67,000 migrants living in the city's shelter system. That's not even all of them, it's just in the shelters. Over triple the 21,300 this time last year. And it says Adams said he would ship migrants from the border across the country and give them a 3-year deadline to get themselves settled. So keep in mind, folks, that's 67,000 currently, and that's only the amount that are in the shelters being taken care of by the American taxpayer. And more than double that number are crossing the border illegally into the United States every other week. Now, it's roughly this. Let me show you Breitbart. It says Border Patrol agents assigned to the southwest U.S. border with Mexico apprehended approximately 121,000 migrants during the first 15 days of December. Folks, 121,000 of these individuals apprehended in just 15 days, a little over 2 weeks. How do you think this country is going to survive? And keep in mind, that is only apprehended. That does not include the 11,000 roughly who are gotaways, and that's just what we can keep track of. It notes that unofficial Border Patrol apprehension reports indicate agents encountered approximately 121,000 migrants along the southwest border during the first 15 days of the month, and that brings the fiscal 24 total to approximately 504,000 migrants. Now, if you give these people voting rights, you keep giving them free handouts, what do you think is going to happen to this country? And again, this is where we're at right now. It looks like Democrats believe they're not going to win the election, and so they're looking at other ways, let's say, of making sure that they can override the votes of the American citizen. Whether it's undermining the votes of the American citizen, making it so that Americans cannot vote for the person they want, or flooding the country with other votes while giving incentives, and I would say bribes in my opinion, to the people who will cast those votes, and making it sound like, well, if you don't vote for us, you're going to be kicked out of the country and lose everything we've given you. What do you think is going to happen? Well, here we are, folks. Briefly, let me show you one more thing and we'll jump into questions. The Post-Millennial says this, because New York City looks like it's on its own. And ironically, this is causing a big rift, interestingly, between even very Democrat cities and the federal government under Joe Biden. The Post-Millennial said on Sunday, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said that Democrats underestimated the impact that illegal immigration would have on their cities. And he warned New Yorkers to brace for, quote, extremely painful budget cuts if they pay back the debt created by it. Again, illegal immigration. Mayor Eric Adams is now saying that, quote, everything's on the table when discussing what the city would cut to pay its debts. And he said, quote, We want to minimize the impact to lower-income New Yorkers or educational institutions, our public safety, and keeping our city streets safe. But everything's on the table. Everything. They're talking about cutting sanitation. They're talking about cutting police. What do you think is going to happen in New York if that happens? Now, it continues by stating, when asked about getting help from the Biden administration, Mayor Eric Adams said this, quote, "I believe that we are not seeing that." And he noted, quote, "Seeing the impact of the migrant and asylum seeker issue, how it is taking away from the resources that should go to the day-to-day services of running the city, was making residents weary and angry." And notably, these are a lot of the people who would vote for that party normally. And he noted he did not walk out from D.C. with any level of optimism that anything is going to drastically change, meaning New York City is on its own, as are these other sanctuary states that have allowed this to happen and even in some ways, I think, encouraged it. Now, folks, that said, let's jump into some questions. Let's see here. Let me move over to my laptop. All right. And real quick, too, on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, we're doing the full episodes on Twitter and YouTube and all the other channels, so hope you enjoy it. Again, though, we're doing, the main channel is, of course, Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. So all of you on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, come join us on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com, where you can watch the full episodes 5 days a week. Not to mention our interviews and special features and a lot of other great stuff. We have Roseanne Barr just recently. We had Patrick Bet-Davis just recently. All of that is exclusively on Epoch TV. Patrick Bet-David, alongside all of our investigative features, documentaries, and a lot of other stuff. By the way, we're making free temporarily the January 6th documentary we did, The Real Story January 6th, so check that out as well. Tonight, we're going to be airing the interview with Patrick Bet-David, who does, he's a finance, he does valuetainment, and he also does a lot of, finance stuff. He's a really great guy, and it was a great interview. That's going to be exclusively on Epoch TV tonight, so be sure to tune in. All right, California gal, you're saying, if states remove Trump's name from the ballot, what can we do to not have our voting rights infringed upon? I'm in California. Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't know what the legal avenue is going to be if they successfully remove Trump from the ballot. They're going to make it so that if you vote for Trump, so first of all, his name is not going to be on the ballot if this goes through. And not only that, but even if you do a write-in and you vote for Trump, they're not going to count that vote because they're arguing that, Trump is ineligible to hold office again. Now, I personally believe the Supreme Court is going to overrule this. I don't think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to support this. And again, I think the hand of the Supreme Court is being forced. I don't know why Democrats are doing this because it could represent a major loss for them either way. I think that they're destroying their party by pushing this agenda. You could say maybe they have something else up their sleeve because, again, I don't think the Supreme Court is going to rule in their favor. And I think really this is going to destroy their credibility as a party. I mean, really, this is the last nail in the coffin for them, I think, if it goes through, and maybe even if it doesn't. But they're trying to do it. California right now, you mentioned you're in California. California right now, they're saying they're going to look at every possible avenue in order to keep Trump off the ballot as well. And so in California, they're going to do everything they can to make sure that you cannot vote for Donald Trump. And yeah, look, this is the same group of people talking about defending democracy and saying Trump is a threat to democracy and saying that, the soul of our nation is under attack. And then they want to make it so that you cannot vote for the person you want to vote for. What a ridiculous, just sick, twisting of narratives. Here we are. Again, I don't think it's going to hold up. If it does go through, personally, I don't know what the legal avenue is going to be if you want to vote for Trump still. I do think you're going to see probably mass protests. I think you're going to see people enraged. And I'd agree with RFK Jr. that this is going to make a large part of the country literally ungovernable. I mean, especially if we believe that we're being taxed without representation, which we are. Look, we're being taxed to pay for free houses of illegal aliens who are undermining the basic system of law in this country. We have cities going bankrupt. We have basic services like police and sanitation getting cut for taxpayers because we have to pay the living expenses of people who are just violating the laws of this country, of people who are disrespecting the American citizen to that extent, of people whose very presence in this country is a violation of our laws and whose very act of coming here is a demand for free handouts. I don't think the American people are going to stand by this much longer. And I think that Democrats, if they don't fix this, that combined with everything else they're doing, is going to make a large part of this country ungovernable. And I don't know what they're playing at here. I mean, it's incredibly stupid, just being blunt. What the Democrats are doing with this lawlessness, with the just persecution of the American taxpayer, I'd say amounts to persecution at this point. Even with undermining the basic system of democracy and elected government, I don't know what they're doing. I mean, I wonder if they're right in the head. Maybe some of them are not right in the head, but it doesn't make logical sense. Let's put it that way. It could be just that they're desperate. You know, Donald Trump has a weird effect on people, and I think that's part of the reason why they hate him. One of the reasons why they hate him so much. You know what it reminds me of? So Donald Trump, and it's funny because you can read some of the reports on this. They blame Trump for baiting them into acting crazy. They blame their unhinged behavior on Trump. You know, they say it's Trump's fault that they're behaving the way they are, that they can't, keep face. You have these politicians who spend a lot of time and a lot of money creating a very clean facade. And Trump comes in there and just calls them names and calls them out and baits them into becoming unhinged. You know what it's like? It's like you have this person in the movie and they're on the bed, like an Exorcist movie. And, they look kind of normal. Then the priest comes in and throws holy water on them and they start like speaking Latin. You know what I mean? They start spewing out like all these crazy, Latin words and stuff. Trump has that effect on them. He's like holy water being thrown on these people. And they start, their heads start spinning and they start spewing out all this craziness. That's what it's like. He has this weird effect on them and they lose face when he does it, U.S. citizen on the ground, you're saying, when is the last day for Trump to be on ballot, and how does taking him off cause problems for other states? They're saying January 4th. So in Colorado, they're not moving on it just yet. They're giving a grace period, and that is going to be, they're asking the Supreme Court to take up the case. They're forcing the hand of what, interestingly, Special Counsel Jack Smith is also trying to force the Supreme Court to do before the elections, because, again, they want it to affect the elections. They want the Supreme Court to make a ruling on executive privilege, and they want the Supreme Court to make a ruling, notably on, again, the 14th Amendment argument, and also possibly on whether Trump did, in fact, engage in insurrection, which has not yet been determined at all. There's no legal basis for that just yet, but they're doing it anyway. If the Supreme Court does not take up that case, then January 4th will be the last day, and after that, Trump is going to be off the ballot. And if the Supreme Court does not take this up, I can almost guarantee you're going to watch a lot of other states in the U.S. also try to do the same thing. Any kind of, Democrat-run state, or even some of the Republican ones, you're going to watch them do this. They've already tossed this out in many of the lower courts, but it's going to keep going higher. And so it's all on the Supreme Court at this point. This is totally in the hands of the Supreme Court, and we'll see what they do. Sandy Sefkick, you're saying, today I just feel trapped by the idiots who think this is our great country and that Biden is doing an excellent job. How can so many of us feel this way? How do we keep losing? What must we do to overcome this? I'd say if you go out and, I actually travel a lot. I think a lot of you know that. I was just at Turning Point USA in Arizona. I speak at a lot of events. I do a lot of interviews on different, smaller media and other, even some pretty big ones actually. I get out a lot and I meet people on the ground and out and about. You'd be amazed how many people are clear on these things. And you do. I mean, I don't just interact with Republicans. I interact with libertarians. I interact with Democrats. I talk to a lot of people, and it's interesting that among the Democrats, a lot of them think Biden. They think that where the airplane is being flown by the inflatable dummy at this point. You know what I mean? You ever see that movie Airplane? Something's not right. You know what I mean? They know they don't really support what's happening in this country. And a lot of them, they don't like Donald Trump one bit, but many of them do believe there was some funny business in the elections. Many of them do believe that, again, that, maybe 50% don't like Biden. Many of them believe that Trump might actually win. And you're having, I think in this country, if you really get out there, a lot of Americans are not necessarily Republican or Democrat. You have a lot of people who just vote for the person they like. I know a lot of Republicans, people who voted for Trump, who might vote for RFK Jr. I've met a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people who like Trump who, might vote for Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy and who no longer like Trump. I know a lot of people who, they voted for Obama, but they don't really like Joe Biden. You know what I mean? And so the country is not, at the high levels, it's hyper-partisan. But at the grassroots, a lot of Americans, they're not hardline like that. The real hardline ones, the real extreme ones, the crazy ones, that's a very loud minority. And that very loud, very crazy, unhinged, utterly insane minority of, the far left, I would say, the people pushing all the crazy gender stuff, they're just really loud. They don't represent in any way the majority of this country. I think you'll find that you can still have pretty sane discussions with a lot of people if they haven't bought into the far left. And so you do have that. James Dyson, you're saying, I am still waiting for a lefty and some righties to explain to me why they hate Donald Trump. I had a long conversation with a friend. I love the guy. We've been friends since high school. But he's like a big supporter of like Ocasio-Cortez and the squad, and he talks about Greta and how we should all listen to Greta Thunberg. I love the guy. He's a friend of mine, but we disagree just about on every political issue you can imagine. We had a conversation one time, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I make my bias clear. I generally like Trump. I do hope Trump will rapidly change his stance on Xi Jinping. I've made that point clear. I disagree with Donald Trump on the way that he's been handling things with China. I think he needs to call out Xi Jinping as a murderous dictator. That he can't keep trying to, pump up Xi Jinping as being some, valiant leader. Xi Jinping has more blood on his hands than probably any other leader in history. You're talking about the Chinese Communist Party, 70 to 100 million people killed since it took power, late 1940s. I mean, it's insane. And Xi Jinping is a leader of that system that is engaging in open persecution of Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, Muslim Uyghurs, and ethnic genocide in Tibet and Inner Mongolia and other places. He should be just seriously condemned. America does not stand for that. I disagree with Trump on that. But generally speaking, I make my bias clear. I generally do like Trump other than that. And, I had a discussion with this friend about the rumors going on around about Trump, that he said that Trump, he worked with Russia. And so I presented him with the facts and said, actually that was a lie. It wasn't true. Trump, wanted to do this or that. Basically we went through just scandal by scandal by scandal, and I was able to show him evidence debunking the narrative. As a journalist, that's what I do. You know what I mean? I look at the facts. And when it comes to the ways that they've tried to demonize Trump, the facts just don't hold up, which has been, the stance I've been going on. I think he's been maligned, and the reporting just has not been accurate. But what you'll find is that people who've been force-fed just these fake narratives nonstop, the dislike of him, because this has worked in a way through like emotional agitation, they even if they can rationally understand that all of these stories are fake, that every story they've been told is fake, 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 fake. Trump, Russia, the overfeeding of the koi fish, that Trump is going to start World War III, and so on and so on and so on. Fake story, fake story, fake story, fake story. And you can show them the evidence. They will still not change. And the reason for that is because they're not doing it based on logic. They're doing it based on emotion. This is actually a really cunning propaganda technique that they're using, in my opinion. It's emotional manipulation. When you talk about communist movements, they have what's called agitation propaganda. And it works on the same strategy as Pavlov's dog. In fact, if you go back to the Soviet Union and Vladimir Lenin and Dr. Pavlov, the experiment was Pavlov would, of course, he was doing experiments on dogs. They would give the dog food, ring a bell, the dog would salivate. And they found that eventually, if you just rang the bell and did not give food, the dog would still salivate, because the dog had come to associate the sound of the bell with food. And so the dog would have an unconscious physical reaction because it had been made to associate the symbol of the bell with the physical act of eating. You find the same things with the emotional agitation, agitprop, they call it agitation propaganda, and with other forms of manipulation like this. You can read about menticide, for example. Menticide. You can read the book The Rape of the Mind by Merleau. The way that they do this is that they feed people rage. They feed people anger. They feed people narratives, racist, Hitler, sexist, bigot. And they associate that emotional reaction with a symbol, in this case being Donald Trump. And because they keep doing that, it's emotional manipulation, it's emotional agitation. They rile up people's emotions and then make people associate those emotions with the figure they're trying to tear down. That's the way that type of propaganda works. And so, my friend, I love the guy, I disagree with him, a lot of stuff. I can shower him with facts. I can show him every fact there is. I can debunk every political narrative. I do it for a living. This is my job, right? And he won't change, because he's not judging based on facts. He's judging based on emotion, and he's been emotionally manipulated, through this propaganda system. And that's just the unfortunate reality that we deal with. I do think that you just valiantly keep telling the truth, and things turn around eventually. But for me, I'd say that's what I do. Just stay close to the truth. You'd be good. Gassy Hansen, you're saying, Josh, this is off topic, but someone told me that Taiwan's constitution says that it is a part of China. Is this true? I've not heard that. I think the Taiwanese people would be enraged if that was the case. I've never heard that before. I don't know. Maybe it does, but I've never heard that before. I can say that the Chinese Communist Party claims ownership over Taiwan. And of course, a lot of countries, unfortunately, even the United States, have adopted a policy of recognizing Taiwan as being part of China. The argument that we always had was which government is the legitimate government of China. Because actually the United States used to recognize the Taiwanese government as the government of China. The United Nations actually changed that. And the Chinese Communist Party was the illegitimate government. When we started getting buddy-buddy with the CCP, which unfortunately we did, beginning with Nixon, where, he wanted to split the Soviet-Chinese alliance, which I can understand. And of course, Bill Clinton, of course, giving the Chinese Communist Party things like most favored nation trading status. We began to not only help build up the Chinese economy with the belief that, if they become more capitalistic, they'll become less communistic. And we found the opposite, that actually the CCP manipulates the material interests of other countries and manipulates its monopoly on markets while subsidizing and lying about its wealth. It's able to conquer other markets and even force its policies, its authoritarian policies, into other countries by manipulating that process. That being said, back on Taiwan, Taiwan, I mean, you can argue historically whatever you want. Taiwan is an independent country with its own election system, a president, a free government, and it is not communistic. The Chinese Communist Party is the polar opposite. It is a totalitarian, murderous system that very much wants to invade Taiwan. I would say that even if Taiwan is part of Greater China, which I would personally disagree with, but again, it's on interpretation, that it's by no means part of the Chinese Communist Party. And that should be a very clear distinction. And I've heard some very dishonest people even use, for example, Taiwan as the example of why China works. A ridiculous argument that in no way holds ground. Because why would the CCP be talking about doing rocket attacks and invasions of Taiwan if it was already part of China? You tell me. Also, the presidential elections in Taiwan, they're going to be held on January 13th. I'll be reporting on this as that goes forward. We do have reporters there, and so we'll have some good coverage on that. And that decision on the upcoming Taiwanese elections could actually determine the future of the country, because you do have a pro-CCP political party in Taiwan. The anti-CCP one is currently in power, but you do have a pro-CCP one. All right, folks, that said, let's end it here. Again, I have the interview with Patrick Bet David of Valuetainment airing tonight. That's going to be exclusively on Epoch TV, so EpochTV.com. Come and join us there. Also, we have a Christmas sale, and we're saying Christmas, not happy holidays, not happy Xmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, folks. We have a 25-cent sale for Christmas. So again, if you want to watch all of our other great content or just support the show, come over to Epoch TV, EpochTV.com, or you can get a Christmas gift of Epoch TV and uncensored news for your friends and family. All right, folks, that said, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you. I always enjoy talking with y'all. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.